Hey everyone, hope you're doing well, and if you're new here, what we do on this channel is talk about people who have had tragic and unfortunate ends to their life. Anyway, let's jump straight into the video. Crown Prince Sado of Korea died in 1762 when he was just 27 years of age, after his father, King Yongjo of Korea, locked him in a large rice chest for over a week. His life was just as bizarre as his death, but was he a tragic victim or a dangerous madman who threatened the lives of everyone at the Korean court? Crown Prince Sado was born on the 13th of February 1735. His birth title was Crown Prince Janghyun, and Sado meant thinking of with great sorrow, which was the name given to this Korean prince following his early death. Sado was born as the heir and crown prince of the Korean king Yongjo, the 21st king of the Joseon dynasty, which had ruled the Kingdom of Korea since 1392. Thus, when he was born in 1735, Sado was born as the putative heir to an ancient family which had ruled Korea for nearly 350 years. When he was just 8 years old in 1743, the king decided that Sado would marry Lady Hong, the daughter of Hong Pang Han, a brilliant Korean scholar. Lady Hong was just 8 years old herself when the young prince and she were betrothed in 1743. They married a year later in April 1744. Marriage at such a young age was not untypical for royalty in the Far East, with the idea being to forge strong alliances. Lady Hong is a central figure in Sado's story. She lived into her early 80s and only died in 1816. Prior to her death in 1805, she elected to compose an extensive memoir of her life, which provides us with the details of Sado's life and his subsequent death. This is a crucial account of the prince's death and the circumstances leading up to it. It seems that Sado was not well liked by his father, the king, a hard man who apparently angered very easily. In 1728, 7 years before Sado's own birth, his half-brother, Hyo Jang, had died. This early heir may have been well liked by Sado's father, and thus Sado faced a life of criticism from his father for not meeting the expectations the king had of his deceased son. Accordingly, he became very cautious and quiet around his father, a trait which would only further disappoint the king in the hopes he had for his heir. This acrimony was compounded in 1745, when Sado appears to have suffered some sort of psychological trauma at just 10 years of age. Lady Hong made it clear in her memoirs written 60 years later that Sado's troubles dated to this event. It is unclear what he had actually suffered from, though a recent study has argued that Sado had syphilis, and the symptoms from this inflicted a kind of dementia on him. This would certainly account for the appalling behaviour he engaged in the years ahead. Prince Sado began behaving in a particular fashion in the late 1740s, but problems became particularly acute in the 1750s. For instance, Lady Hong related how he developed a bizarre superstition around his clothes, where he would need as many as 20 or 30 outfits laid out for him in the morning, and it would take him hours before he could select which one he would wear, before burning all the others. Sometimes he would burn several silken outfits as an offering to a spirit figure, before he finally selected an outfit which he would wear. Also, if his servants made a mistake while aiding him in his strange daily ritual, Sado would become very agitated. Writing years later about these events, Lady Hong remarked that, if he managed to get into a suit of clothes without incident, one had to count it as great luck. Despite this behaviour, Sado was otherwise at this time able to attend his duties as a crown prince. He conducted himself appropriately at the official occasions at court. He was also starting a family, a vital task to any heir to the throne. In 1750, when he and Lady Hong were both just 15 years old, they welcomed their first child. Sadly, however, this son died in 1752, at just 2 years old. But by then, Lady Hong had given birth to a further child, the future Crown Prince, Chongzhou. Nevertheless, even as Chongzhou was born, Sado's troubles were getting worse. He suffered extended periods of mental instability in 1752 and 1753. He began having terrible nightmares, and his thought process became delusional. On some occasions, he would claim that he could see the Korean god of thunder. Such was his anxiety about this delusion that he became terrified of the sky. Until the mid-1750s, Sado's behaviour had been largely unknown to the king. The Korean royal family lived in many different palaces, and whole suites of apartments went together, which meant that they did not interact with each other for long stretches of time. As such, it was entirely plausible that King Yongzhou was completely unaware of his son and the heir's transgressions. However, in 1753, the king had taken a court lady named Moon as his concubine, and it was through her brother that he first began receiving reports of Sado's eccentric conduct. Things got worse from 1755 onwards. Sado developed a stammer and apparently entered prolonged bouts of mental confusion in which he angered easily and became very aggressive. Then, in the winter of 1756, his mother took ill and died, following which Sado is rumoured to have taken to attacking his servants. It appears to have been from this time, in 1757, that Sado potentially began killing some of the servants at court and engaging in other seriously violent acts. He had suffered from an illness around the mid-1750s, and it is this coincidence that has led scholars to assume he was now suffering a form of dementia brought on by a bout of syphilis. Whatever the cause, his behaviour now became lethal. It was later claimed that every day, bodies of those he had killed were being carried out of the royal palace as Sado entered his 20s. As he got older, the prince apparently started forcing himself upon the female servants of court as well. Further incidents arose periodically in the years that followed. In 1759, Sado took a seamstress named Ping-Ye as his concubine. When the king learned about this, he flew into a fit of rage, and legend has it that Sado jumped into a well outside the palace in response. 2 years later, in a bout of insanity in 1761, he subsequently killed the new concubine. The chaos which had been created by Sado at court throughout the 1750s grew worse in the early 1760s. Alcohol had long been banned at the Korean royal court, but in 1762, Sado now introduced it here, and not only that, but he began to drink enormous amounts of it himself. Long parties were held where he and his entourage would drink heavily and engage in orgies. As a result of this intoxication, Sado's behaviour spiraled even further out of control, and it was this further decline that forced Sado's father, the king, to act. Worse still, at this time, Sado appears to have been leaning towards trying to engage in incestuous behaviour with his sister, and had spoken about killing her husband, his brother-in-law. This was the last straw. On the 4th of July 1762, the king summoned Sado to an audience chamber in the royal palace. Here, in a formal declaration, he struck the floor with his sword and declared that the crown prince was no longer his designated successor. A heavy wooden rice chest had been prepared nearby, measuring 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot. Sado was then put into the chest. He appears to have resisted, but presumably he was overcome physically by the palace guards. 2 days later, The chest was moved to the upper palace, where it was tied with rope and covered in grass. It is unclear from the accounts if the king actually intended to kill his son by leaving him inside the chest, or if there was some other intention behind it. But he was left in the chest for over a week. After 8 days, no more noise could be heard from the chest. When it was opened, Sado's body was found lifeless inside. Thus died the Korean Crown Prince, a young man who had terrorized the Korean court and its servants with his violent and unstable behavior. Years later, rumors would abound that Sado had been the victim of a plot which had sought to depict his behavior as much worse than it actually was. But there is little reason to believe that Lady Hong would have fabricated her tale over 40 years later. After his death, Sado's body was retrieved from the rice chest and buried in the royal tomb mound. Sado's servants, including eunuchs, court guards, workmen and shamans, were all put to death in the days that followed, in keeping with Korean royal tradition, which stipulated that a king's closest servants should join him in death. King Yongjo was said to have been so upset in the aftermath of having killed his son that he ordered him to be commemorated and gave him the name Sado, meaning thinking of with great sorrow in Korean. Lady Hong lost her place at court and returned to her childhood home, but it was not the end of her role in Korean politics or Sado's bloodline. In 1776, Sado's father died without an heir, and so Sado's son Chongjo now acceded to the Korean throne. He would rule for 24 years until 1800, building a more unified state ruled by a powerful monarchy. As such, the line which Sado founded eventually developed into that of the imperial emperors of Korea when the Korean Empire was formally established in 1897. Sado's story has been considered so strange that it has been retold many times since, with several films and television series based on it, the most recent being The Throne in 2015. So, what do you think about the Crown Prince Sado? Was he a dangerous madman, or somebody who was suffering from severe mental illness? Or might his behaviour have been invented afterwards in order to justify his murder in 1762? Thank you everyone so much for watching this video on Prince Sado. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave me a like and a comment down below. Make sure to subscribe and have notifications turned on so you get all my videos as soon as they're uploaded. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next unfortunate end.